Hello, everyone. Welcome to Heart of the Matter with Sonya on WYTV7 out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm excited. I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee this evening, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Always want to hear from you. I can be reached at Heart of the Matter, WYTV7@gmail.com, or you can also message me on Facebook. And so I always love to hear those prayer requests. Please, if you have a story you'd like to share, an organization that would like to share your heart, share your purpose, please reach out to me because I would love to have you as my guest on Heart of the Matter. We're going to go ahead and get started this evening. Very special subject. God just laid something I feel like so powerful on my heart. Probably about 2 weeks ago, we have a TV station here called WSMV, and Holly shared a quote on her Facebook, and it just really stirred something inside of me, touched me, and I just felt like it would be a good subject for us to talk about. And the quote says, when or if there's a Goliath in front of you, always remember the David inside of you. And I thought, wow, that is so powerful, because sometimes when we're facing all the Goliaths in our lives, we forget that we have the power of God inside of us. And so those are the things that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to share a few stories, and I love to tell stories, and I'm going to talk about some different ministries and how we can face those Goliaths in our life. And so, I always remember when I was very young that David and Goliath was always one of my favorite Bible stories. Maybe because, he seemed to be the underdog, and, we always want to pull for that underdog to win. And, even when we think about sports teams, they're talking about, the NBA, the David and Goliath teams, the underdog. But, David really wasn't an underdog because he knew that he had the power of God behind him. So he knew that victory was his. And so, I want to take just a moment, since we're talking about those stories, because a lot of those memories take me back to when I was a child. I can remember our teachers talking about those in Sunday school, training union. And so all those older Bible stories that we heard from the time we were little bitty always bring back memories to me when I hear about those. And I want to take just a few moments to honor and pay tribute to one of my 5th grade teachers, Miss Birdie Shimmick. Anyone that was in her class growing up knows that she did something very special every morning. Each morning after we would say the Pledge of Allegiance, we would sit down and she would pull out this huge Bible storybook. And she would pick one out and she would read it to us every morning before we would start class. And now any of you out there that know Miss Birdie Shimmick know that she was very strict. And when it came to learning in school, she meant business. And we all knew that. Now, at the time, I didn't appreciate that. But as I've gotten older, I realized that that was just because she wanted us to be successful adults. And she actually probably didn't even realize it at the time, but she was a missionary right in her own hometown, in her job every day. And, sometimes when we think about being a missionary, we think we have to go to these third world countries. We think we have to get out of our city, go somewhere else. But every day she got up and she was a missionary right where she was. Now, there's another little story I want to share with you about a missionary. I can remember going to a women's conference. Gosh, it's probably been 20 years ago. And I can't tell you who the speakers were. I can't tell you what they spoke about. I can remember a lot of the ladies that went with me on that trip. But we were at a pretty good-sized church in Longview, Texas, or Tyler, Texas. I can't even remember which town we were in. But one of the things that really stood out was the church held about 1,500 people. And as you turned to leave to go out the door, there was writing above on the wall. and it was above all the doors, and it said, "You are now entering your mission field." And that really stuck with me because I thought, wow, I've never thought about that. And so I want you to realize that wherever you are in your life, that you're on the mission field. Every time you walk out of your house, even when you walk in your house, that you are a missionary to the world. And so whether you're a mom or dad, maybe you stay home with your children. That's a lot of important responsibility. You're raising those children, you're teaching them by your actions. And so you're setting the example of how to live a successful, godly life. If you're a teacher, you make such an impact on students every day. Whether you realize it or not, the things you say, the things you do, the examples that you set, the leadership skills that you show, and no matter how small it is, that may make a difference in a child's life. So whether you encourage them or whether you discourage them. And sometimes those moments that maybe you say something that you don't even mean in a discouraging way, that child remembers it the rest of their life. Well, Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so told me that I couldn't do that that probably wasn't possible. So I want to encourage you, whatever job you're in, to speak positive, to build each other up, to encourage each other, to lead people to God, and to know that they can have faith to live successful lives. And so those are just a couple of the stories I wanted to share with you that I remember, growing up and several years ago. And, one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is the story of David and Goliath. That's what I mentioned when we first started. So I kind of want to go back to that. I went back and read 1 Samuel 17, where it talks about the story of David and Goliath. And I was amazed at how many details that I had forgotten. And I read it 3, 4, probably 5 times in the last couple of weeks, because every time I would read it, something else would jump out for me to really think about and to ponder. And so I want to encourage you to go back, pick up your Bible, read some of those Bible stories that we grew up knowing as children, but as adults and grandparents, parents, we've kind of put those down in a way, and we've forgotten how powerful those were. And so to start off, the Palestine army had gathered for war. The two armies faced each other, and they were camped for battle on the opposite sides of a very steep valley. And a Philistine giant measuring over 9 feet tall, and he had on a full set of armor. He would come out each morning and each evening for 40 days. And he would mock and he would challenge the Israelites to fight. And his name was Goliath. And Saul, the king of Israel, and all the army were terrified of Goliath. Everyone was scared to death of Goliath. No one would stand up to him. And so it just became a mockery. Every day he would come out and taunt and mock the Israelites, for someone to stand up and fight him. And so one day, David, he was the youngest son of Jesse. And his father had sent him out to the battle lines to bring word to his brothers and, kind of bring word back to his father of how things were going on the battle lines. And so David happened to hear Goliath shouting out his daily defiance, and David could see the fear within the men of Israel. And he couldn't figure out what was going on, why everyone was so scared of this giant Goliath. So David kept asking, who is this Philistine that should defy the armies of God? And his brothers would say, you need to just go back and tend your sheep. You don't need to worry about it. You need to just go on your way and don't worry about it. And so David actually volunteered, and he went to Saul. And he basically begged Saul and told him, he said, I've killed lions and bears. I've removed the sheep from its mouth. And I can do the same thing with the Philistine Goliath. The Lord who delivered me from the paws of the lion and the bears will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And so Saul finally agreed. It was against his better judgment. He finally agreed. Well, he even dressed David in his own tunic. He gave David his armor. And, he even put his bronze helmet on his head. And David fastened the sword over his tunic. But he couldn't even walk because it was so heavy. And he wasn't used to all that armor on him. And so he just said, I'm going to take this off. So he took everything off. He took his staff in his hand. And he went and he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached Goliath. Well, this made Goliath very angry. He basically made fun of David, and he told him, he said, I'll give you to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And he said, David says, you come against me with sword, spear, and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord. Wow. How powerful. How powerful to think that he was willing to stand up to this 9-foot giant. He was probably a late, teenagers in his teenage years, small young man. But he wasn't afraid because he knew that with Christ and God on his side, he was going to win the battle. He knew the battle was his. And so he said, this day I will strike you down and I will cut off your head. And the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. Wow, how powerful, how bold. And so at that point, Goliath charges forward towards David. Now, you would think most people, if I see somebody 9 feet tall running towards me and they've got a spear and a javelin, I'm going to want to run. Not David. David ran straight for him. And he put that smooth stone in his sling, and he slung it, and he caught Goliath right in the place in his forehead, the temple. And that stone sank deep in, and Goliath just fell to the ground. David pulls out his sword and cuts his head off. And that is such a horrific story when you think about how powerful that was back then. And so, when I look at this and I think about David, and, he really had faith. And so that caused him to look at the giant from a different perspective. He looked at the battle from God's point of view. And so when we look at our own Goliaths, let's try to face those with God's strength. And, I'm reminded of a scripture in Deuteronomy 1, verse 30. And it says, the Lord your God who goes before you will himself fight for you. Wow. How much more powerful can you get than to know that God goes before us in every circumstance and fights for us? So when you're facing those Goliaths, remember the David inside of you. I know sometimes that's hard, and I know sometimes, that we can just be overwhelmed. And so, I want to encourage you to think about God and to think about David, and just remember that you have that same power on the inside of you. And so back to our question, what is your Goliath? We have a lot of different issues in life. That could be anything from possibly an illness or a sickness, maybe for yourself, maybe someone you love is sick, maybe someone you love is facing a terminal illness, they've been diagnosed with cancer, maybe someone has been in a terrible accident and they're trying to recover. So you want to just think about the things that you can pray over them and remember that you have that power for healing. And then maybe it's a relationship, maybe a spouse, maybe a child, maybe just another family member or even a friend. Sometimes we can feel like they betray us. We can feel like they don't care about us. Sometimes people go through divorce. That can be very challenging because we feel like we can't breathe. We feel like we can't survive. And maybe you've lost a loved one. Just remember that you can pick yourself up with the strength that you have inside of you, just like David did. And then maybe it's financial issues or debt. You know, sometimes people find that burden so heavy that it's unbearable. They can't see a way out. You know, they feel like the wolves are howling at the door. Maybe their phone's blowing up with debt collectors. They receive things in the mail. And so sometimes people can just find them in situations that seem overwhelming. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I want to encourage you, when you go through those things, maybe look at the Psalms. Psalms 25, all through, 34, 37, up into the 50s and 60s. This was the same David that cried out to God every day through the Psalms for healing, for hope, when he felt like he was crushed, when his spirit was crushed. And so the same David that was the warrior that had God in his life cried out to God. And so if you're going through some of those things and facing those Goliaths, just go to the Psalms and read through some of those. You will be amazed at how they will cry out to you and your soul, and you just lift that up to God. Sometimes people have issues with commitment. Maybe they've gone through some things as a child. Maybe they can't make themselves figure out even why they can't be committed to a relationship. And, sometimes they just don't feel good enough to be in that relationship. They don't feel worthy. They feel like a failure. And so it makes it very difficult for them to commit to a healthy relationship. And again, just go back, lift yourself up in prayer, and speak over yourself. Speak good things. Speak positive things. I am strong. I am adored. I am admired. I'm accepted. I am worthy. And it's amazing the power of the spoken word can have over us. And even just then, speaking those, and we've talked about this on previous broadcasts, that things that you speak and that you fill your heart, your soul, your mind with can make a difference in your perception. When you start speaking those things, it will change your whole demeanor. It will change your attitude. And when that changes, people around you start to notice. They see a difference in you. And so a lot of times I've had people share with me that they deal with addiction of all sorts. It could be everything from alcohol to drugs, pornography, anything that maybe has control over your life. And God is always there willing to help you through that. And so I know there are a lot of programs out there. I know John 3:17. We're actually going to have a guest on, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, that's going to talk about that ministry, how it's helped others heal. We've got a young lady lined up that's going to be speaking about prison ministries and how she came to terms with someone in her family that was in prison. And so there's just a lot of issues that sometimes when we go through our everyday life, we're dealing with our own Goliaths, and we don't think about people that may be facing something of their own. And so it's very easy for us to be judgmental for someone that seems like their Goliath is something that we don't have to deal with. And so I just encourage you to build each other up, to lift each other up. And, one of the things that, we talked about in our earlier broadcast was the word being medicine for our souls. And so I want to go back to the Psalms and filling your heart and filling your soul with that. And the things that we can do to try to better ourselves is, number one, admit and face your Goliath. Be truthful, be honest with yourself, and realize that you have a Goliath. So many people just go through the motions and they keep having those addictions. They have trouble getting angry. They have financial issues. Maybe they're sick. Excuse me. But just face those. Be honest with yourself. And then I encourage you to find a good mentor. Find someone that you can trust and talk with them. have someone that can keep you accountable. That always helps all of us. If we have someone that we can be accountable to, it makes a difference in choices that we make, because we know they're going to hold us accountable, not judge us, but just help hold us accountable. And then also, we can take time just to think about moving forward with our life. Don't get caught up in where you were. Try to move forward and see that there are better times ahead. Focus on that and speak out, the things that you want to be. Call them into fruition. Talk about, make a list. When you sit down tonight, make a list of where you see yourself in a year, positive things. And I just encourage you to do that. And always know that you can reach out to me, again, Heart of the Matter, WYTV7 at gmail.com. I'll also share the phone number on Facebook where you can actually view that. And so there's a lot of ways that you can get in touch with me. And I can't, personally offer any counseling or help, but I can put you in touch with organizations that can mentor you, that can counsel with you and help you. And so I just want to encourage you, if you've got Goliath you're facing in your life, remember the David inside of you and know that you can do all things through Christ that gives you strength. And I want to thank you again for being a part of our broadcast this evening. I want you to know that each and every day that you're in my prayers, that you're blessed, that you have favor, that you have the strength to overcome anything you're facing every day. And I just asked you to know that you can move mountains through that faith. Thank you again for being a part of our broadcast this evening. I'm Sonya Harden with Heart of the Matter. Have a great evening.